Yo, Beth, that shit crazy.
Everybody to All Even Live exclusive. I am Barry Grant Jr., host of the All Even podcast. To my left is Mike Guido, host of Guido's Gridiron Blitz. Down in the bottom left, we have Matt Cataruzolo. And today on the show, we have NFL researcher, historian. He's a writer for Fansided, NFL Spinzone, FullPressNFL, Jets X Factor. Welcome to the show, Russell Baxter. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, guys. How are you guys doing? Have you kind of figured out what happened on Super Sunday yet?
Yeah, we're still trying to figure it out, man. Hopefully, you can be able to give us some insight on what exactly happened.
All right, Barry, go.
Well, listen, I thought Tampa's defense was great, but I don't know. I was watching some of the parade yesterday, and Brady's best throw might have been to the trophy.
That was pretty impressive, especially because I hear that he was intoxicated too. So the fact that he did it under the influence, that's pretty impressive by Brady. But I really want to talk about, you've been around football for a long time, 3 decades, I guess, right? And how did this get started for you? Like, your love of football, did you play? Or was it something that you just picked up and said, I just like the other side of the game?
Well, I was a football fan and grew up in Pennsylvania and didn't know that much. I was actually a baseball fan before I was a football fan.
Oh, wow.
And used to love the Pittsburgh Pirates. Roberto Clemente was my favorite baseball player, probably is still to this day, with a little lean toward Bob Gibson, who just passed away in the last year or so as well, a great Cardinals pitcher. And then I just picked up on football. And, in the 70s, when I was growing up, the Steelers were very, very prominent. They were in the middle of their dynasty and so on. And I learned a lot about the Steelers and started to learn a lot about the rest of the league. And then in the early 80s, not knowing what I really wanted to do and not a college student, I was always told I had some writing ability. So I just started pursuing some writing things and put together a resume. I even wrote stuff that had nothing to do with sports, just to get some experience and so on. And lo and behold, in 1987, one late night on an answering machine, I got, after sending out cover letters and resumes and different things, I got a call from New York, from a paper that no longer exists. It's called College and Pro Football News Weekly. And they were looking for someone. So I went out there in July. Now, there's a very interesting twist to this. The gentleman who I work for at College and Pro Football News Weekly is probably a name that you're very, very familiar with if you're an ESPN person. And that is Howie Schwab.
Wow.
For people who might not remember a TV show called Stump the Schwab.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Howie was the person who hired me in New York.
Nice.
And he wasn't in New York much longer after that. He went up to ESPN full time. 1989, ESPN was looking to expand its NFL coverage. They had just for someone about primetime and countdown and just notes in general. And I started sending stuff up there on just notes. In 1990, I went out to the Pro Football Hall of Fame for the second time and met a gentleman named Bob Rauscher, who was looking to bring me aboard to help out on Saturdays. That same day, at the Hall of Fame, I met 2 guys. You might have heard of them, Chris Berman and Tom Jackson, who were had done the ceremonies. And that's kind of the beginning of lifelong friendship with both of them. Within a few years, I was the main researcher on Prime Time. I did that show for 17 years in the studio. Never missed a show. Who would? Who in their right mind would miss that show? Okay.
Right.
Eventually became what was called the main research coordinator for the NFL for ESPN in general. Left there about 10 years ago now. Spent 2015 with CBS Thursday Night Football, going on the road with James Brown and Bill Cowher and Deion Sanders, and got to run into Phil Simms every once in a while, who I knew because he worked with us at ESPN for a little bit. But meanwhile, have been writing, whatever I can get my hands on. Did some stuff for Bleacher Report. Did some stuff for NFL Magazine shortly, which was a short-lived project by the league. Whatever, if it's football, I'm interested. And, learned how to adapt to social media. Lo and behold, more than 50,000 followers. I have also follow a lot of people, but I'm very conversational on social media because I believe it's called social media, not unsocial media.
Absolutely.
So, Facebook, all the different avenues, it's such a different world now from when I first started out doing what I'm doing and so on. And fortunately for me, as I kid sometimes, if the internet ever crashes, I can still do my job.
That's right. That's right.
You're like one of the last of the Mohicans.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, Howie was a guy who brought enormous amount of knowledge to all sports. And when he hired me, true story, he hired me not based on my resume. He hired me on my cover letter. My cover letter is what sold him because he was looking for a football fan. And I was a fan, okay? I wasn't a journalism student at all. I just remembered a lot of football. I still remember a lot of football. And lo and behold, it's paid off for a career.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are trying to, follow in kind of those footsteps. Russell, it's good to talk to you again. I don't know if you remember being on my show. You've probably been on a ton of shows by, in the meantime, but I remember last year I had you on.
Oh yeah, all the networks have been calling me left and right, Mike. Yeah, you know that. So.
I have a feeling. Yeah, right. But it says in your in all of your profiles anywhere that I look that you're not only a writer but you're also a historian, right? You study the game. That you have this deep knowledge of not only the game today but of the game prior, right? How does one become that? Like, how much studying do you do? How much knowledge do you have to have before you can actually claim yourself to be a historian?
First off, I'm old. Okay, so that makes me historic. Okay, historian. I don't know if the historian is necessarily a claim per se. I have been watching football for 50 years.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not necessarily anything I've studied. I've just kind of retained it like water. It's like water retention. Okay. I can't explain why I remember all the things. I mean, I could sit here and do all 55 Super Bowl scores in the span of 6 minutes, just bang, 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 bang. Why? I have no idea. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think it's passion. What days the garbage go out of my house? I have no idea. Okay. But I still know the 55 Super Bowl scores. All right.
Right.
So I don't know if I'm always been an observer of things. And when I watch football, it sticks to my head. And, in the 22 years I was at ESPN, I was very fortunate. I got to watch a lot of games because we would sit in a room with numerous TVs and get ready for NFL primetime. By watching all the games, and then the highlights would be cut, and I would add statistical support. And I would do the inside the numbers on the show and so on, and that morphed into other things at the network and so on. I did things with Mike and Mike, Green Goldberg when they had their show on and so on. We used to do a segment called the 5 Things You Need to Know. And that became a football staple for a couple of, and in truth be told, it was 4 things you needed to know and 1 cheap shot at Mike Greenberg, who is the consummate Jets homer.
Right.
And in fact, so much so that for a couple of weeks, I didn't put any Jets stats. I didn't put any Jets stats in the 5 things. And he emailed me, said, "Are you mad at me?" I said, "No." I said, "No, I'm not mad at you." But I will also say this. My website, which is profootballguru.com, that idea was generated from Mike Greenberg, because when he used to introduce me from the segment, he would introduce me as the dean and the guru of the NFL research department at ESPN. And then after I left, members of my family and so on all said together, well, why don't we look, Pro Football Guru, wonder where we get that website and so on. As we found out we could get it. And it kind of just came from there and so on. And it's kind of, I try to tell people, I do not refer to myself as a guru. I mean, if anybody looks at me, I'm more like a Buddha than a guru. Okay. So, as you can tell, I love what I do. I don't take this all that seriously. Perspective is very, very important to me. So I take seriously being accurate. Yep. Okay. I have a kind of a standard saying that I pass on. It's on my Facebook page as well. Everyone is right. Not everyone is accurate. Because if you tell me you think Jim Brown's the greatest running back in football history, you're right. And if you tell me Emmitt Smith is, you're right. Okay. But if you tell me Joe DiMaggio had a 54-game hitting streak, you're wrong. So to me, my responsibility when I was at ESPN was to make sure we were accurate.
Right.
Okay. So when I gave Chris information from a game, I gave Tom information from a game and different things, we wanted to make sure we were factually accurate, because I used to kid people. I say, I was never wrong at ESPN. He goes, well, how can that be? I said, you don't understand my point. My point is, if I gave Chris or Tommy or one of the other talent a wrong number, they're not going to say, well, Russell Baxter or the researcher gave me the number. They're the one who's going to be the one who's like, oh, he said the wrong thing. He said the wrong thing. And obviously you can't do that too many times, make mistakes as much as anybody else and so on. But the responsibility of being a researcher, and to a degree, Mike, like I said, historian, right, is to make sure you are factually bottled up. And that's more important than anything else in this medium, because it all goes to credibility. I can remember being in a room sometimes and someone will say to me, when was the last time that blah, blah, blah did blah, blah, blah? I went 1954. And he said, wow, is that right? I said, no, but you believe me.
Oh, boy.
And of course, I would go back. But here's something I also very important and passed on to the people I work with as well. Like I said, I could sit here and tell you this and tell you that and tell you this and tell you that. But if it went on the air, it was double checked and sometimes triple checked.
Yeah.
Okay. I can remember I had someone helping me out with primetime as they were kind of grooming him to do other NFL shows. Sure. And the proudest moment I ever had with this young man was the fact that he knew something dead on about the San Francisco 49ers. And he was walking out to the set to pass it on to the talent. And he stopped and he came back and he checked it again. And that told me, that's a good job. Yeah. He wasn't going to take the chance of being wrong, because he would never be wrong. Who would be wrong? The guys who said it on the air. I always took a lot of pride in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Russell, with your long history of studying and being a fan of the game of football, we've seen seasons that have taken turns, unexpected circumstances impacting seasons, like the 74 NFL strike, the 82 NFL strike, the 87 NFL strike. So you've seen seasons turn out how they've turned out in the past. What was your anticipation for the challenges that the NFL, not just the NFL, any sports league, had to face in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic? And on top of that, were you surprised that they were able to make it from week one to the Super Bowl?
Yes, I was watching. One of the things I love to do every year is I go to the Pro Football Hall of Fame inductions. I've been doing that pretty regularly since 1989 for like 30 years. And of course, I didn't have them this year. And then once they canceled that in the game, I started to get nervous, to be honest with you, because that was really the first sign of, you're canceling a product on the field. But to answer you, Matt, very surprised. This NFL season, I compare to, now I'm going to date myself here, okay, which I'll probably do 17 times while I'm on with you guys. There's a little game that I used to have as a kid, and sometimes you can find them. And it's these little sliding things with the numbers 1 through 15. And you've got to try to put them in order: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There's one empty slot, but you will spend a lot of time trying to rearrange it to get it in the right order. Okay, Google it, trust me. Okay, that was the NFL season this year. We had games every day of the week, didn't we? At one time or another.
Oh, sure.
Tuesday games, Wednesday games. Mm-hmm. They knew they were going to have Saturday. I don't know how they got it in, and I give them an awful lot of credit. I mean, I had people telling me the season was never going to happen. And, they just had a championship water parade. Okay. So even with the expanded playoffs, which was put into place even before COVID and so on, I thought they did a great job. I know there's a lot of people accusing of, well, this advantage and that advantage. The NFL was pretty staunch in terms of what they had for criteria. Okay. Adam Schefter, who I worked with at ESPN for a couple of years, laid it out very, very well as far as, protocol. I mean, they were, I would get emails, I'm sure everybody else did who was on the list. The testing was constant. Okay. And, but there were some players and or teams who broke protocol. Okay. And that's why we kind of had the curveball here and the curveball had, first one was Tennessee and, Baltimore later in the year and, which was an assistant coach and so on. So, all said and done, we even though I had like a little minor COVID scare for the Chiefs, before the Super Bowl with a couple of players and so on.
Right.
So I thought it was remarkable they were able to get it in. And when it was all said and done, are we like totally shocked that the Chiefs got back to the Super Bowl and that the Buccaneers with some guy named Tom Brady actually got there as well? I mean, it's not like it was this wild, crazy season. There was a lot of predictable. I mean, year after year, usually have 5 or 6 new playoff teams. Now, that number was going to be weird this year because we have 14 teams instead of 12 teams. But it was pretty standard fare as far as that goes. I mean, New England was not in, but Kansas City was back, and Baltimore was back, and the Saints were back, and the Packers repeated. Pittsburgh wasn't that far removed from the playoffs from a couple of years, but you had pleasant surprises. Cleveland for the first time in 18 years, the Bucs for the first time in 13 years, and you have that sometimes as well. Remember, Jacksonville was 15 minutes away from the Super Bowl 3 years ago, and they haven't recovered since. So, I mean, that's kind of the up and down nature of the NFL during free agency and so on. But I thought they did a hell of a job getting it in, and it was a year offensively unlike anything we've seen. Scoring 30 points in a game didn't guarantee you winning. Sometimes scoring 40 points in a game didn't guarantee you winning. Right. So, Derrick Henry repeats as champion. Aaron Rodgers has 48 touchdowns and 5 picks. That's absurd. Okay. One stat, though, it's still held up, which goes to show you how you have to have balance in this league, guys. 55 years of Super Bowls, still waiting for the first quarterback to lead the league in passing yards and win the Super Bowl the same year.
Wow. That's never happened?
That's never happened.
Wow.
That's interesting.
I told you.
Never happened. Mike, the 12 highest scoring teams in NFL history in points in the season. Okay. How many of those do you think won a Super Bowl?
You got
I'm not trying to stump you. I'm just.
No. Tell me. I'm really
None.
That's crazy.
Wow.
0.
That's crazy.
Okay. And yet in the Super Bowl, what have we seen 2 of the last 3 years? A team not score a touchdown.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Isn't that nuts?
Defense.
That's insane. That's insane.
Yeah. Well, it's because no matter how many times you alter the rules, the premise of the game remains balance and defense. Okay. And balance is not a slight to the offense. Some people take it as a slight. Okay. All these great numbers that are put up by quarterbacks and so on, you win championships in your fantasy football league. Okay. You win MVP awards. When was the last, anybody remember the last time that the league MVP was on the Super Bowl championship team? It's Kurt Warner. It's more than 20 years ago. So I remember Herm Edwards said to me one day when I was working, because those are MVP numbers. They're not Super Bowl numbers. Okay. All that, we saw Jameis Winston lead the league in passing yards a year ago.
Yeah.
Okay. He had more turnovers than a bakery.
Oh boy.
Russell, let's talk about the Super Bowl here. It was a shocking, outcome to see.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that it was actually going to be a closer game than it was, but due to all of Kansas City's offensive line issues. You know, we didn't think that they were going to struggle like that. But the biggest stat to me that I saw was the 497 yards that Patrick Mahomes ran away from. Now, was there any other statistical thing that you took away from that game that maybe nobody else saw? Because I'm really curious, because, you know, a lot of people are going to like dissect this game years down the line. Like, what did you see that was the most surprising thing to you, in your opinion?
Kansas City's determination not to run the football.
Yes.
Okay. I think they only ran the ball 17 times.
Wow.
Okay. If you want to protect your offensive line and protect your quarterback, okay, where is the balance? You know, I go back to the game where they beat the Bills in Buffalo during the regular season, and they ran for 245 yards, and they ran it persistent. I thought that's what they were going to come out and do. Okay. With a plethora of backs. And to me, for lack of a better word, Barry, I think they panicked.
Yeah.
Okay. I think they panicked. I think they lost their composure. I mean, people want to talk about the referees and the calls and stuff. The calls to me that stand out are Chris Jones with a personal foul and Tyrann Mathieu. That's the stuff where he's losing composure. Okay. Holding is this. I mean, there's other calls and so on, obviously. But I thought the Chiefs panicked. I thought the Chiefs played the entire game like they were behind by 40, okay? And they never really were, if you think about it, because in this day and age, with the 2-point conversion, as long as they were nibbling away, that was it. But then eventually they turned over the ball twice, and I can tell you in Super Bowl history, that is the biggest no-no of them all. It's one of my favorite statistical numbers. Okay. And I'll give it to you in two ways. There have been 55 Super Bowl champions. Okay. 19 times in those 59, the winner played without turning over the ball. That's not bad. That's like 1/3. Yeah. Okay. 55 Super Bowl losers, only twice did a team not turn over the ball and lose the Super Bowl.
Wow.
So the other 53 losers turned over the ball at least once. Okay.
Wow.
But here's my favorite number. If you take the combined turnover differential between the winners and the losers, 55 champions, 62 turnovers. 55 losers, 163 turnovers.
Wow.
That would be plus 101 for the winners.
Wow.
Okay. So I think what that lends to is panic.
Yeah.
Taking and listen, some of those numbers are crazy. I mean, the Bills had 9 against the Cowboys and the Broncos had 8 against the Cowboys. But albeit the Baltimore Colts, dating myself again, when they beat the Cowboys in Super Bowl 5, they turned over the ball 7 times and still won the game. Okay, so take those 7 turnovers away, and the other 54 Super Bowl champions have 55 turnovers. So taking care of the football in that game is essential. Balance, ball security. It's so funny. I hear people call quarterbacks game managers for different reasons and stuff like that. Every quarterback is a game manager. You just have different things to do. As I just said, throwing all these yards, and it's great. I mean, you get the Fantasy Football League trophy, and it's great. I want to say Tom Brady threw 40 touchdown passes during the regular season this year.
He did.
Okay. I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah,
if he did, he's only the second quarterback to throw at least 40 in the regular season, win the Super Bowl the same year. And the other one was Kurt Warner. I mean, Peyton Manning threw 55. They only lost the Super Bowl by 5 touchdowns. Okay.
Right.
Tom Brady threw 50.
And
they scored a season low 14 points in the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes scored 50, threw 50, and what happened to him? Aaron Rodgers didn't make it. Peyton Manning didn't even make it a championship game one year. Dan Marino threw 48, and they got blown out in the Super Bowl. So, I mean, if you're throwing the ball that much, there's 2 things you're not doing. You're not able to run the clock. You're not able to protect your defense. You're leaving your defense out there. That's why some of these great offensive teams, like to me, the best offense I ever saw in all the years I watched was the late 70s, early 80s Don Coryell Chargers. Okay, that's Dan Fouts, and that's Charlie Joyner, and it's eventually Wes Chandler, and it's Kellen Winslow Sr. I mean, they were amazing. But boy, after a while, they just burned out their defense. Okay, because they were leaving it out in the field too long. You can only tell that the offense is out there too, and so as I said, but it's a different mentality. Okay, if you're scoring as fast as they are, that offense ain't on the field that long.
Right.
Okay, so you've got to be able to mix it in. And I was original to answer Barry's question. I was stunned that they only ran because when they did run, there were some holes. Okay, even though Tampa's defense was number one in the league against the run, and Vita Vea was back. Okay, they had some success. I was actually really surprised, Barry, also that they didn't use the short passing game.
Right.
Okay, they seemed like they were either throwing it to Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce. And Kelce wound up catching a bunch of passes, but you could tell he was not the factor. I mean, I thought he could even be the MVP of the game going into and stuff. And by the way, no tight end's ever been Super Bowl MVP. Okay, but it was almost like they panicked. I mean, Tampa Bay, other than Tom Brady, there's probably like a handful of guys on that team who had been in the Super Bowl. Jason Pierre-Paul obviously is one of them, and so on. Kansas City had just been there the year before. But Kansas City looked like the team with the jitters, and Tampa Bay looked like, one of those, and they looked more confident. They were certainly more physical.
Absolutely.
Okay. Kansas City took a lot of body blows. Okay. I mean, it almost seemed like your classic finesse versus power. I mean, just watching Levante David and Devin White run around that field. They brought a lot of ferocity. I didn't see a lot of ferocity from the Chiefs on Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you, Russell. Like it looked like a team that there was a lot going on behind the scenes that maybe affected their play because, we all know what's going on with Andy Reid's son. So who knows what was going on? That team did not look like themselves.
Yes.
And, it's unfortunate because I think we could have really got a great Super Bowl.
No, and we had seen them. Right. Well, I mean, listen, first off, it does show you how tough it is to repeat.
Yeah.
Okay. This is the third time in less than 10 years a team won the Super Bowl and went back and tried to repeat and didn't get it done. The Seahawks. And by the way, Tom Brady was involved in all three of them. Okay. Well, if you're in the Super Bowl every other year, of course you're going to be involved in all there. Okay. And he was on when the Patriots beat the Seahawks, they prevented Seattle from repeating. Okay. Interesting enough, when the Patriots lost to the Eagles prevented the Patriots from repeating. Okay. And of course, then we saw this year where Kansas City tried to go in there and so on and repeat. And it's tough. It wasn't that hard. The first 11 times it happened, the team repeated 8 times. Now it's 3 in a row where a team hasn't repeated, but that's also reflective of free agency in general. It's hard to win a Super Bowl, and it's hard to be in the playoffs year after. I mean, what New England did was wild, if you really think about it. Now who has the longest playoff streak in the league? It's Kansas City, 6. Okay, followed by the Saints 4 and Baltimore 3, and that's it. There's only 3 teams been in the playoffs 3 straight years.
That's insane. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I brought this up on my show on what's today? Thursday? I brought it up on Monday.
It must have been a memorable show.
So I brought it up on my show on Monday that if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, or if you're let me just say this, if you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, I think you got to be a little bit worried, obviously, about what happened in the Super Bowl, and you might be upset about it and all that, and
right.
But to me, it's kind of foreshadowing. Like if you think about it in the future, right? Patrick Mahomes' big contract has not taken shape yet, right? Like he's still on his rookie contract this year. They weren't paying him anything. So once his $40-50 million a year, I mean, Russell, he's making his cap hit in 2027 is $60 million. Like he's going to be making a boatload of money for the next 10 seasons. if you can't protect him, that's what it looks like. Should the Chiefs be worried?
Reliable tackles in league. He kind of took a back seat for a long time in Cleveland to Joe Thomas because Joe Thomas never missed a play. Yeah. Okay, well, Mitchell Schwartz wasn't far behind. And when Kansas City signed him, I was stunned. I couldn't believe that was the year Cleveland was letting everybody go. They let Alex Mack go and sign with Atlanta, and they left Mitchell Schwartz. That blew me away. Now, of course, he's missed the last few weeks. And then you throw in Eric Fisher getting hurt in the Buffalo game. So now you're down your two veteran starting tackles with playoff experience and Super Bowl experience, and you got to shift people around, okay? And easier said than done. I would be worried if the prognosis, Mike, for those guys was bad. Then the one thing you got to remember about offensive linemen is age is not a factor, okay?
Yeah.
These guys play 12, 14. I mean, and not everybody's Bruce Matthews, don't get me wrong. These guys play and they get better with age because they learn all the tricks and they learn all the nuances and so on. Okay. So I would be concerned if that was the problem. Their defense, as good as it was last year down the stretches in the playoffs, took a little bit of a dip in the second half of the year. Okay. It came out strong, but they weren't nearly as opportunistic as they were. I saw Carolina score 31 points on them. I saw the Raiders go up and down the field on them and so on. I don't count the Chargers game in week 17 because that was against backups and so on. And then they seemed like they were okay against Cleveland and played a pretty good defensive game against the Bills. Okay. And they didn't give up a ton of yards against the Bucs, but they gave up a lot of yards on the ground. Okay. Leonard Fournette had a pretty big day, and Tampa Bay was a hell of a lot more balanced than the Chiefs were. Sure. So I hear what you're saying and so on. I also firmly believe that once we get to that stage with Patrick Mahomes, Mike, here goes the reshaping of the contract. Okay. Deferred money here, all that stuff. And that's why you do that with the quarterbacks. Okay. There's so many of them sign these $100 million deals. Now, Patrick Mahomes, you make enough money, you can buy the state of Missouri. So that's a whole different thing. But the way they are able to, how many times, even before that was the salary cap was as big as it was now and so on, back in the days when Troy Aikman, remember, free agency's only been around since 1993 and the cap's only been around since 94. How many times, do you remember how many times Troy Aikman was asked to redo his deal so they could keep people and so on? How many times did Brady redo his deal? They all wind up redoing their deals, and they get it on the back end. So I think that's probably what's going to happen with Patrick Mahomes eventually down the road and so on. I mean, the numbers are extraordinary. And, this upcoming year, even though they're now projecting the cap to be about $10 million higher than they thought, 5 or 6 months ago because of the possibility of the week 17 game, and that brings in extra revenue, the cap usually goes up significantly every year. So.
Yeah, well,
so we'll see what happens. But I mean, listen. The concern to me with any team trying to repeat or trying to get back to the Super Bowl is that the rosters change sometimes very, very significantly from year to year now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Exactly. So sticking with the Super Bowl here, we talked about the Chiefs. I want to shift over to the other side to talk about Tampa Bay for a little bit. Now, during the regular season, Tampa Bay at one point was 7-5. They were a wild card team beating Washington. Yep. Now, with your experience in seeing all these great playoff runs and all of these Super Bowl championship runs by different quarterbacks, different dominant teams, and teams, it's a motif that teams catch fire in the postseason. There are teams that catch momentum at just the right time to take them, where they want to go. Where would you rank Tom Brady's postseason run this season, beating Drew Brees, beating Aaron Rodgers, and finally beating Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl? Where would you rank that postseason run all time with the other ones that you've seen in all your time covering football?
Well, I'm not much on the quarterback beating the quarterback thing and so on. I mean, it's the NFL. It's not Wimbledon. Okay. I mean,
thank you.
So it's not that. And to be honest with you, Matt, I don't think Tom Brady had an extraordinary postseason. Okay. He did just enough. I mean, his first 3 playoff games, he completed 55% of his passes. I mean, 60 is probably like, threw 3 picks in the NFC title game.
Mike's really rejoicing right now.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
think this was here's what Tom Brady brought to the Bucs. Calm. Okay?
Yeah.
Don't panic. Listen, he threw 3 picks. Big deal. Let's just shake it off and move on. Okay? You didn't get that with Jameis Winston. You also don't get that with a lot of other quarterbacks. I mean, Patrick Mahomes looked panicked on Super Sunday. Okay? So how many things has Tom Brady seen in 21 years in the NFL? Okay, you orchestrated the biggest comeback in Super Bowl history. Okay, he was also on the losing end of a team that went 18-0. Okay, he's seen it all. Okay, so in 21 years, but I mean, listen, let's if you're throwing it out that way, the way you just did. I mean, I remember Joe Flacco in the playoffs. Didn't they beat the Broncos and the Patriots in back-to-back weeks? That would be what, Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, although, again, Wimbledon, all right? So the correlation you see with all these is defense. When the Packers won the Super Bowl 10 years ago, and Aaron Rodgers had a great postseason, don't get me wrong. Pick 6 against the Falcons, pick 6 against the Bears, pick 6 against the Steelers. Okay, when Joe Flacco and the Ravens won the Super Bowl in 2012, remember he threw 11 touchdown passes and no interceptions in those 4 playoff games, and you cannot take that away from him. Ravens, 10 takeaways in 4 playoff games.
Wow.
By the way, Joe Montana played 3 playoff games in 1989. He threw 11 touchdown passes and no interceptions. So again, that's not a knock on Joe Flacco. It just shows you. Well, in the 4 playoff games, I mean, there was so much talk about Brady in the Saints game. The Saints imploded in the 4th quarter, turning over the football. Okay, so I think a team's postseason runs more than I do Matt quarterbacks postseason runs. Like I think about the Ravens. Okay, in 2000, which was, oh my God, it's 20 years ago now. Okay, touchdowns they gave up, 1 in 4 playoff games.
God.
Okay, 1
Dominant defense.
1. Well, and listen, take it this way too, Barry. If you think about it, they actually played 20 games that year. Okay, including the playoffs, on their way to winning Super Bowl 35. Okay, now I'm just telling you how much the game has changed to a degree. The Rams this year in the regular season gave up 296 points and led the league. Again, it was a high-end year, okay? All right? In 20 games in 2000, the Baltimore Ravens gave up 188 points.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
That doesn't make any sense.
100, and now you could do that on your fingers. That's less than 10 points a game for 20 games.
Wow.
Okay, and listen, offensively, they had a spell where they won 4 or 5 games and couldn't score a touchdown. Trent Dilfer came in off of Tony Banks, but defensively, I mean, they were frightening. Right. 85 Bears, so many different examples and stuff. So I don't know if I answered your question, Matt, but we did fill a lot of airtime there for 6 minutes.
You did learn a lot, definitely, yeah.
Okay.
All right, Russell. I definitely have some round the horn NFL questions in regards to the quarterback position right now. We're seeing a lot of movement that we're not used to seeing historically. When you talk about franchise quarterbacks, you're there for a long time till you break down and the team decides to move on from you. What do you feel about these quarterbacks now saying that they want out, they want a different situation? Like, is this a good dynamic for the NFL to have? Because in my opinion, I don't like to see franchise quarterbacks move teams. I just don't believe in. I believe in when John Elway was with the Denver Broncos, they weren't a great team to start off, and he led 3 Super Bowl. He led 3 teams to the Super Bowl that didn't belong there, and then they actually figured it out later in his career. Why are quarterbacks not willing to take the take the hits and then see if the franchise can be able to, you know, bounce back and then have some time in the sun. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think what has happened now in this era of free agency, and more so the era of the more vocal athlete, okay, that a lot of these things that are being said these days are now more made public than they ever were maybe 10, 15 years ago. Social media, I think, has a part of that. I'm not blaming social media because you can't make someone say something, but I think, you know, with all the constant interview requests and the different questions that get asked and so on, and I think there's also a degree of impatience with certain teams and so on, which will get you in trouble all the time. Ask the Browns, who went through 30 quarterbacks. That's not an exaggeration. 30 quarterback. Baker Mayfield's the 30th different starting quarterback since 1999. And that instability is a problem. And I'm guessing you're referring to some of the recent comments by Russell Wilson, who had some things to say, and which is odd because Russell, in the second year in the league, they won the Super Bowl. In his third year in the league, they were in the Super Bowl. Okay. But again, there's more of a vocal. I mean, Deshaun Watson is upset with the franchise, and you know, people are very sympathetic toward his cause, and I understand it to a degree because if you look what's happened down there internally, Barry, you know, with the GM and Bill O'Brien, who would, you know, wore too many hats, DeAndre Hopkins, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a combination of factors. I think these are conversations or comments that some of these guys probably made 15 years ago, but you really didn't hear about them and so on. But again, I always point out the fact that while baseball has been in free agency so much longer than the NFL has, okay, it's different now. And every once in a while, right now, we're actually also in a phase that within the next couple of years, well, I can't say Tom Brady because he shows absolutely no signs whatsoever wanting to go anywhere, okay? But, I mean, Philip Rivers is retired, okay? By all accounts, Drew Brees is ready to walk away, okay? The Steelers are having to work something out with Ben Roethlisberger. His cap hit is absolutely enormous, okay? And we're at that age now where we might almost have a transition of these older players. I mean, Matt Ryan's not a spring chicken anymore. Aaron Rodgers is, you know, getting up there in age. And so I know players play longer and so on. Matthew Stafford has now moved on, you know, but I mean, he came into the league 2009. So it's almost, you have a new wave. You also have a new wave of style of quarterbacks than you had and so on. So I think it just could be wind up being one of these years where we do see a lot of change and so on. I mean, Dak Prescott's situation, you know, he wanted to break the bank. They exchanged things, and he winds up getting hurt. So that turns out to be the thing. We saw the impatience, and no one truly knows what went on behind the scenes with Washington and Dwayne Haskins. But I mean, to let a first-round pick go that quickly, had to tell you that something was really amiss there and so on. So you're right. We could see a lot of different changes from the 32 guys who started in week one this year. And I think it's for a lot of different reasons, but some of it also that dissatisfaction with organizations is the fact that players have no problem expressing that anymore. They really don't, you know, almost regardless of the circumstances.
Right.
So I want to ask this question because I feel like we talk about it ad nauseum, at least we do on this show. You know, Barry and I were on an Instagram live yesterday.
You might want to try some Pepto-Bismol. So.
Barry and I were on an Instagram live yesterday, and we
right.
had some interactions with some fans and everything like that. And they were saying, we were talking about the Brady, Peyton Manning, the GOAT-ish discussion, right? My point is that it all depends on what greatness means to you, right? Is it winning? Is it talent? Is it and that's an age-old discussion. So I'm not going to ask you who the GOAT is, but who's the best quarterback you've ever seen?
Joe Montana.
Really? Why?
I'm going to go waste any time. He was the best quarterback I ever saw because his ability in the clutch and his ability in the postseason was amazing. Okay, guy played 4 Super Bowls and threw 11 touchdown passes and no interceptions. Okay, he had to come back against the Cowboys. He didn't do it all the time. He laid an egg against the Vikings in '87. Okay, they were not a very good football team in 1988. He struggled for the most part. Steve Young was in there for a couple of times. They were 6-5 after 11 games, and then kind of put it together. And of course, he had the great game-winning drive. He was Joe Montana when I was growing up in the 70s, and that would be the 1970s, not the 1870s, just to make sure we're clear here, okay? There were 2 guys you did not want to have the football at the end of the game with 2 minutes left or a minute and a half left. Kenny Stabler and Roger Staubach. You wanted to make damn sure that clock said 0:00 with those 2 guys. And that's what Montana turned into. Okay, Montana did it in Notre Dame too, against Houston, I think in the Cotton Bowl as well. So he's the best. That's not a knock on Tom Brady, okay, at all. Okay. By the way, I tweeted out yesterday. I saw the video of Tom, who apparently, for whatever, however you want to interpret it, but even he on his Twitter account mentioned, what do you write? Avocado tequila? Did you guys see that?
Right. Yes.
So I tweeted what he wrote, and I wrote simply, good old avocado tequila. GOAT.
That's good.
Fitz.
Hey, if you're going to set it up, I'm not.
Perfect.
I think that's probably
listen,
man. Who knows? Who knows?
Who is this guy? You know, that's not for me. It might be the guy who's with. Listen, he had a blessing. He's earned everything. His work ethic obviously is amazing. What he passes on to an organization is amazing. I go back and you look at the fiery confrontations he's had on the side. I remember him yelling at Bill O'Brien when they were playing a game in Washington back in 2011, and of course that always makes headlines and so on. But you know, you saw what Bruce Arians allowed him to do with the team and so on, and he was able to, he got Gronkowski out of retirement. He somehow got Antonio Brown there after he'd been suspended half the year, and both of them caught the touchdown passes, and the Super Gronk had 2. So, but for me, Joe Montana, and it used to be, I used to have it Joe Montana, Johnny Unitas, and then Brady a couple of years ago. But Brady and Johnny Unitas was just way ahead of his time. That was more of a case of not so much being clutch. He had his clutch moment in the 58 title game and all that stuff and so on. But that was on a different parameter. Joe Montana, and the thing about Joe that people forget is, or some people forget, his ability to get out of the pocket and run. Okay? When they beat the Dolphins in the Super Bowl, in Super Bowl 19, he did as much with his legs as he did with his arm that day. Okay? And people, you had Jerry Rice. Well, Jerry Rice wasn't with the team in 1981 or 84. He only had Jerry Rice for a couple of years.
Right.
Okay? And then once that happened, it took it to a different level and so on. Okay? But early in his career, it was Earl Cooper and Charlie Young and Freddie Solomon and different guys like that. He threw the ball to everybody. Bill Walsh was brilliant. But to answer your question, again, my answers are not, thank God you don't give me a 2-minute time limit. To me, Joe Montana, okay? And again, not a knock on Brady, all right, at all. And it's almost like you feel like you got to say that,
right.
Okay? Yeah, but and you shouldn't, to each his own and so on. Peyton Manning was superb, but Peyton a lot of times didn't play his best football in the postseason. Okay, he just didn't. And it was more than just Super Bowls and so on. And he was really on his last legs when the Broncos won that Super Bowl.
Sure.
Against Carolina. That second half was rough to watch. And again, the Broncos had 194 yards of total offense the entire day against Carolina and won the Super Bowl by 14 points, which just goes to show you there's a lot of different ways to score points in this league. You don't always say. Go back to Tom Brady for a second. Okay? When they won their first Super Bowl, guys, was 2001. They beat the Raiders in the snow. They beat the Steelers in Pittsburgh. And then a week later, because of 9/11, there was no off week. They beat the Rams in the Super Bowl in the Superdome. 3 postseason games, okay? The Patriots offensive unit scored 3 touchdowns. 3 touchdowns. By the way, one of those touchdowns had nothing to do with Tom Brady because he was on the sidelines at Pittsburgh in the AFC Championship game with an injury. Drew Bledsoe threw a touchdown pass, not Tom Brady.
Wow.
So,
God.
by the way, their defense and special teams, 3 touchdowns.
Wow.
And a couple in the Pittsburgh game, Ty Law's pick 6 against Kurt Warner in the Super Bowl. There's so many ways to win. And to me, that's the beauty of the game is you don't have to pile up a whole bunch of, I mean, Tom Brady threw for 505 yards in the Super Bowl and they lost. Okay. Tom Brady threw for less than 150 yards in the first Super Bowl he played in and they won. Okay. So, I mean, do what you want with it and so on. I mean, but again, my favorite thing about football. I've said this for years and years and years. The ball isn't round. It does some wacky, funny things.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Very poetic. I like that.
Very, very.
Yeah,
Wait a minute. Pro football poet?
there's a nice ring to it.
Got the
Yeah,
trademark.
I got to think about that. Could be an offshoot.
There you
Got trademark.
Yeah, Russell, I want to stay just with the theme of quarterbacks here.
PFP. I got to think about that.
Staying with the theme of quarterbacks here that we're talking about with all this free agency, you being involved with Jets X Factor, I think that they have the most interesting situation just in this offseason heading into the start of next season. Now, there are a lot of things that they could do. There's a lot of speculation. Should they attempt to trade for Deshaun Watson? Should they take a quarterback second overall? Should they keep Sam Darnold with this new coaching staff and use their near $70 million in available cap to build around here? What do you think is the best course of action for the Jets to take this offseason?
Well, I don't write as much I haven't written for X Factor in a while, just so you know that and so on. So I wish I could give you insight as far as the team goes and so on. But, as far as my own personal view, I think you make a big mistake when you pull the plug that quick.
Yes.
Okay. It's been 3 years. It's a new coach. It's a new coaching staff. Let them know who he is. Okay. All of a sudden, just don't get rid of him because we're going to start over again. Okay. I think you got to kick the tires with a new coaching staff with him and so on. So one thing about Mark. Oh God. The one I just went blank and so on. So the one thing about Sam Darnold is he has not been able to stay healthy, and more ways than one. He's not just injury-wise, and of course he had the mono thing a couple of years ago as well, which thought once he got back affected him for half the season, and then he slowly but surely. He always had a knock at USC for turning over the football, and that's kind of carried over a little bit with the Jets. Okay, not that like he gets a lot of help and so on. Defensively, they played okay until the Raiders game. Still trying to figure that one out. Okay.
Oh yeah.
But for me, Matt, I don't think he was the 3rd overall pick in the draft. I know he was drafted by somebody else. You've already got a new coaching staff coming in and a guy who's never been an NFL head coach in Robert Saleh. Okay. To me, as far as personnel, I think I'd probably limit the changes as much as possible. Now, this being said, if they somehow can get Deshaun Watson without breaking the bank in terms of draft choices and money and all that stuff, and it's a deal that they can't refuse, then that's a totally different story. Okay. And that would also go with dealing with it. If someone wants to offer them something they would have never thought possible for Sam Darnold, I don't think you turn that down either as well. But I don't know if when you're trying to trade a player, your asking price is limited. Okay. If they know you're trying to get rid of him, okay, why would they break the bank to get him? Okay. Unless, the Rams, weren't necessary. It wasn't that the Lions were looking to get rid of Matt Stafford. It was more like the Matt Stafford was looking to get rid of the Lions. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I think the Rams were certainly looking to move on from Jared Goff because his first year with McVay was 2017. I don't count 2016 Jeff Fisher. He only played 7 games and the team was a mess. And then midway, kind of late down the season in 2018, even though they made the Super Bowl, the turnover bug started to bite Jared Goff, okay? And he struggled with turnovers in 2019, and he struggled with them this past year, most notably in a game against Miami, where he looked completely overwhelmed, and then the home game against the 49ers, okay, in which he just gave up the football and so on. And I'm not saying you can't cure that, but you almost got the sense without talking to someone that Sean McVay and the coaching staff felt like Jared Goff had maybe peaked a couple of years ago. Okay, that's just a guess on my part. But again, to answer your question from 2 days ago, I would not pull the plug on Sam Darnold yet unless someone makes me that Luca Brasi offer.
Can't refuse it, right?
When you can't refuse.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess we're gonna stay with the quarterback situation right here. Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys. Russell, have you ever seen a quarterback?
No.
Like me and Mike talk about this, and we're Cowboys fans, but we also just look at the game a little differently. And it's like we saw last year that it sounded like Jerry and the agent had a deal in place, right? The deal was imminent. And then all of a sudden, Jerry is now incensed because the deal got taken off the table because they thought that the asking price went up. Now,
right.
The fact that he's coming off an injury, they have no choice but to franchise tag him because he doesn't want to accept the $35 million a year. What would be your way of solving this issue if you were the general manager of the Dallas Cowboys? Because like I said, we've never seen anything like this, and we're seeing 2 other quarterbacks in that draft class that are also getting questioned in regards to them getting big deals, and now the team's having buyer remorse. So what are your thoughts on that? And as a GM, how would you approach this?
I think they've backed themselves into a corner as far as Prescott goes. And actually the person that probably backed them into the corner the most was not Jerry Jones. Well, yes, I got to say Jerry Jones. But he got a little shove from Ezekiel Elliott, okay, who kind of jumped the gun because he wanted to get paid. And that kind of threw everything into an uproar and so on. I would have gotten Ezekiel Elliott's deal was not pending. Dak Prescott's deal was, okay? You don't want to put the franchise tag on a quarterback. You pay a heavy fee. You certainly don't want to do it 2 years in a row like Washington did,
right?
With Kirk Cousins. That is not ideal, okay? In fact, the league put in a stipulation about the tag going up because I don't know if you remember this going back a few years. Walter Jones, who is now in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and Orlando Pace, they would get franchised year after year after year to these 1-year deals and stuff like that. And then finally they changed the rules. Okay. So if I'm the Cowboys, I don't think you have much of a choice. The other guys who filled in, be it Andy Dalton or whoever, okay, didn't get the job done. I think you look at Dak. I'm sorry, what?
No, I said Ben DiNucci and the other guys.
Right. No, take your pick. Although I will also say this, their defense was abysmal last year. I mean, bad. And if I'm the Cowboys, I try to get a deal done with Dak Prescott, but not a long term, but not a 1 year. I think more than 1 year. Okay. And maybe there's something they could do like a 2-year deal because that would also make sure he's healthy. Okay. And yet you won't have to go through this again next year. And maybe you can avoid slapping the tag on him. Okay. So if they get those, they can agree to something like that, and then maybe they can start addressing what really ails the team, which is the offensive line, which is not what it was a couple of years ago, obviously. Okay, Andrew Frederick's gone. Tyron Smith has trouble playing a 16-game season. Zach Martin is terrific, but he was a little banged up last year. That was a team that was built on their offensive line, and they're built on the offensive line, which helped the defense. And once that started to crumble and creak and show some cracks, they were going to be in trouble. Okay. And as it turned out, did. And then once he went down and so on, listen, Dak Prescott he's done everything I think he could. He's far from a perfect quarterback. Okay. But he can run, he can throw. He has this, at times where the offense gets a little stagnant with him and so on. Okay. But, I'm going to be really, really curious to see how they play this because I think the smarter move would to get him under contract. But again, if you do this, it's going to be like Groundhog Day. If you keep on doing these one-year deals and you franchise him again, I'm trying to think what the franchise number would be for a quarterback this year.
38 million.
Is what? 38 million. Okay. I mean, that's, I think that's that jump. What was he, 35.5 he got last year, something like that?
31 and a half.
31 and a half. So it's like a $77 million jump or something like that, right, Mike?
Yeah. I mean, that's the least they can afford to do and so on. But again, I'm not saying put a Band-Aid on it, but maybe a little bit of a tourniquet. How's that?
Yeah, that was going to be my next deal was, look, the franchise tag this year, if you tag him again, is going to be upwards of $38 million. If you sign him to a long-term deal, it's going to be upwards of somewhere around 38 to 40 million bucks. I mean, Russell, honestly, if the Cowboys, if by some miracle, and I don't know if they would let this happen, but just by some case that they would, if they let him hit the open market, well, is there another team in the league that would honestly approach Dak and say, here's 40 million bucks, be our quarterback?
No, because it's not smart for any team to do that. Okay. That's part of the issue. And so it goes back to how you started the show, which I think was like 3 days ago, when you were talking about Patrick Mahomes and his money and what the ramifications of that was going to be. Okay. So, no, you don't want to invest all your assets into one person. You can't in this cap league and so on. Well, Tom Brady was able to stay in New England for a lot of different reasons. Okay. And, we've all heard the different stories about how much money he had. And, obviously, I don't like to talk about his personal life and so on. I think that's out of bounds and so on, but people speculate as far as, that money and so on and et cetera, et cetera. But sure, you've got to be able to be in the parameters and maybe get it on the back end. But if you want to keep a team together, I mean, you heard Bill Belichick this year. Bill Belichick's like, we ran out of cap money. Yeah. Okay. We couldn't do what we did in past years. And that was even signed. I mean, they never really broke the bank on free agents. Okay. But they certainly, they spent, but not super spent. Okay. But they also did a lot with free agents because fair or unfair, Bill Belichick has been like so at drafting players.
Right.
Very, very average, if not below average over the last couple of years.
Russell, I know you got to go. So we asked this question to everybody we interview really quick.
Yeah.
Who is the greatest athlete of all time in any sport?
Butter, almond, and chocolate. Ooh. I think you're going to ask me my favorite ice cream. Okay. The greatest athlete in any sport. I'm going to show my age. Well, I'm just going to tell you the first name that popped into my head. Edwin Moses.
Okay.
Oh.
Write it down, Mike.
Track. Edwin Moses is the first name that popped into my head.
And do you want to give our listeners
we're writing that down?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We keep track.
We keep track because we had Martin Gramatica on the show.
Oh, okay.
That said that he had Diego Maradona was his greatest of all time or best athlete.
Right.
We had Josh Powell, former.
Now I want to make it clear. Right. Oh yeah. I also want to make it clear that I said Edwin Moses, okay, and I haven't been around as long to see the original Moses, okay.
So,
Yes. So all right. So on the board now, what do we have? We have Diego Maradona, we have Randy Moss, we have Muhammad Ali, and we have Peyton Manning. Those are our answers so far. And now we have Edwin Moses.
now we have Edwin Moses.
Wow.
Perfect.
You know, I don't know. I got a chance to meet Muhammad Ali at the Super Bowl about 20-something years ago.
Wow. Really?
Which was a big thrill. He was like in the initial stages of his Parkinson's and so on. And my father suffered from Parkinson's as well and so on. So I didn't get to communicate him on a steadily basis and so on. But he told me I reminded him of Rocky Marciano.
Wow.
Wow.
Right. And all I could think of is, are you sure you don't mean Rocky Road? No.
Right. Oh boy.
Oh, man. Well, Russell, it was a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on, man. You know, you can definitely let everybody know where they can find you and what's going on for you in the future.
Bax Football Guru on Twitter. I have to shout out my partner, Julie Voigt, PFG and PFG Vibe, and some of the other stuff I do. Fansided, NFL Spinzone, full press coverage. Keep an eye on Pro Football Guru in the next couple of weeks, profootballguru.com. We're making some changes as far as the website, maybe a new home, et cetera, et cetera.
Cool.
And back to the drawing board, free agency, writing free agency pieces and so on. So it was honestly a lot of fun doing this. It really was. And I can't wait till you get 5 other people so we can do Hollywood Squares.
Russell Baxter, thank you so much, man. It was good talking to you again.
You too. Take care, guys.
All right.
Appreciate it.